He spent his whole life dreaming of luxury cars. But the person who ruined his dream was not a stranger, it was his own family. And this is the story of how patience outlived betrayal. Harold Wexley was an old man in a small town in Ohio. He lived in a quiet house with a wide porch. He liked to sit there at sunrise. He listened to birds and distant trucks. He was gentle and careful with words. He kept his hands busy with small repairs. He fixed clocks and radios for neighbors. He did it for a fair price. He smiled when people thanked him. In his garage there was a bare cement floor, a single workbench, and a faded poster of a bright red roadster. He bought that poster when he was 19. He had walked into a dealership just to look. He had no money then. But he had a clear dream. He wanted a collection of beautiful, expensive cars, not for racing, not for showing off, but for the feeling of craft, the lines and chrome. The promise of a new road. He imagined opening the garage doors and seeing several shapes resting under clean covers. He imagined polishing each hood in slow circles. He imagined starting each engine once a month and hearing a smooth purr. Life did not start with that kind of luxury for Harold. His father worked at a mill. His mother kept books for a grocery. Harold learned early to save every coin. He also learned to notice what people threw away. He rescued broken things and gave them a second life. After school, he swept floors at the local auto shop. He loved the smell of rubber and warm metal. He watched mechanics align wheels and tune carburetors. He asked small questions. He listened more than he spoke. The shop owner, Frank Leland, let him hold tools and read old manuals. Harold became the kind of young man who could hear a bad bearing from across the room. He could feel a loose belt by touch. Still, the dream of a car collection felt far away. It sat in his chest like a steady little light. Years went by. He served in the Navy for a short time. He returned and married a kind woman named Evelyn Gray. They built a modest life. They had one daughter, June. They bought one sensible car, a used sedan with a soft suspension. Harold kept it spotless. He treated it like a rare gem. Evelyn teased him, and Harold laughed. On Sundays he would drive slowly past the dealership windows. He would look at the reflections, and he would whisper to himself, "Someday, someday, someday." In his pocket he carried a small notebook. Inside he wrote names of cars he admired. He wrote model years and colors. He wrote little notes like long hood, clean tail lamps, perfect steering feel. He never showed the notebook to strangers. It felt private, like a prayer. He also wrote prices, and he circled numbers. He made plans that depended on patience. Harold believed patience could turn into fortune. He believed steady work could bend the future. Then there was his cousin, Mason Rourke. Mason grew up 2 streets away. Mason was charming and loud. Mason talked fast. Mason always knew a guy. Mason always had a story. When they were boys, Mason borrowed Harold's bicycle and returned it with a loose chain. Harold forgave him, because Harold forgave almost everyone. As adults they stayed in touch. Mason drifted from job to job. He sold used appliances. He promoted small events. He promised big deals. He would slap Harold on the shoulder and say, "Cousin, you think too small." Harold would smile and say, "I think slow." Mason laughed at that, but he still came around. He liked Evelyn's pie. He liked Harold's calm house. And Harold, in his careful way, still wanted to believe Mason meant well. For a while, it seemed harmless. Just family noise in the background. Just a cousin who wanted attention. Harold did not yet know that Mason would become a hinge in his story. The kind of hinge that squeaks. The kind that can trap a finger if you do not watch it. Harold worked for decades with steady hands. He became the lead technician at the same auto shop. He did not chase flashy titles. He chased clean work. He kept a small jar on his desk labeled Dream Fund. Every week he dropped a bill into it, sometimes a few coins. He skipped extras. He packed lunch. He patched old shirts. Evelyn supported him with quiet faith. She said, "If it makes your eyes bright, keep going." June grew up hearing engine sounds and bedtime stories. Harold would describe a midnight blue coupe like it was a starship. June would giggle and ask if the car had wings. Harold would say, "No wings, but it can make you feel like you fly." When June turned 16, Harold taught her to drive in an empty parking lot. He was patient. He spoke softly. He showed her how to check oil, how to listen for odd clicks, how to treat a machine with respect. Those lessons were love in disguise. Years later June would remember that tone more than any gift. The jar slowly filled, and the notebooks slowly filled too. Harold visited libraries to study car history. He memorized auction terms, he learned how rare colors change value, he learned what honest restoration looks like. He did not want just any expensive car, he wanted the right examples, clean lines, original spirit. One winter a customer brought in a worn luxury sedan. The man said he needed quick cash. Harold saw the potential. The car had good bones and a tired finish. Harold made an offer that was fair. It took most of the dream fund, but Harold felt ready. He brought the sedan home and parked it in the garage. He spent evenings polishing trim. He replaced tired hoses. He ordered parts with careful receipts. When the engine finally started smooth, Harold stood there smiling. He felt like the poster had stepped into real life. He named the car Ruby even though it was dark maroon. It was his first piece of the collection, not the grand lineup he imagined, but a beginning. Then Mason Rourke returned with louder shoes and a brighter watch. Mason said he had connections now. He said he knew a guy in Chicago who could get rare cars at special prices. He said auctions were changing. He said deals moved fast. He said family should help family. Harold listened with that old habit of forgiving. He also felt a flutter of hope. Mason pointed at Ruby and nodded like an expert. He praised Harold's taste. He said, "You are ready for the big league." Harold did not like that phrase, but he liked the idea of learning more. So he agreed to meet Mason at a diner, just to talk, just to hear details. The coffee was thin, the booth seats squeaked. Mason spoke in quick bursts. He laid out a plan. He said Harold could double his progress by joining a buying group. Mason said Harold only needed to front some money. Mason said paperwork was simple. Mason said trust me. Harold asked for written terms. Mason waved a hand and said, "Cousin, it is all standard." Evelyn later said, "Slow is safer." But Harold was thinking of the poster. Thinking of someday. And he made the first mistake. He let excitement speak louder than caution. Mason brought Harold to a small office above a discount furniture store. The sign on the door looked new. Inside there were 2 folding chairs and a desk with shiny brochures. Mason introduced a man named Tyler Brent. Tyler smiled too hard. He talked about opportunity. He talked about collectors in Miami. He talked about quick flips. Harold kept his face calm, but his stomach felt tight. He asked where the cars were stored. Tyler said the inventory moved. Tyler said locations changed. Tyler said security was important. Harold asked for a list of recent sales. Tyler offered a few printed pages with numbers. The pages had no clear names, no clear dates, just bold fonts and confident language. Harold wanted to stand up and leave, but Mason sat beside him like a loyal brother. Mason said, "Harold, you know me. You know I would never steer you wrong." That line felt heavy. Because Harold did know Mason, and Harold remembered the loose bicycle chain. Still, he signed a simple agreement. He handed over money he had saved for years. He told himself it was not gambling. He told himself it was an investment in a dream. For a few months Mason called with cheerful updates. He said, "We are close to a silver convertible." He said, "A black Grand Tourer is coming next." He said, "You will need a bigger garage soon." Harold began to measure his driveway. He began to imagine 2 cars side by side. Then the calls started to thin. Mason became harder to reach. Tyler stopped answering. Harold drove to the office above the furniture store. The sign was gone. The hallway was empty. He knocked anyway. He heard only his own breath. He sat in his car and stared at the steering wheel. He felt a cold wave move through him. When he told Evelyn, she did not yell, she just closed her eyes, and she held his hand. Harold felt ashamed, not just for the money, but for letting someone use family as a key. He confronted Mason at a backyard cookout. He kept his voice low. He asked where the money went. Mason's smile flickered. Mason said, "Things happened. The market shifted." Tyler vanished. Mason said he lost money too. Mason said everyone got burned. Mason said it is not my fault. Harold listened, and he heard something new, not just noise, but avoidance. Harold asked Mason to show bank records. Mason got angry. Mason said Harold was calling him a liar. People nearby went quiet. Paper plates froze in midair. Harold realized then that arguing would not bring back what was gone. He drove home slowly. Ruby's engine felt steady, but Harold's thoughts were not steady. For the first time the poster in the garage looked like a joke. He considered selling Ruby to rebuild savings, but he could not do it. The car had become a symbol of honest work. he decided to keep it. Winter brought snow that softened the streets. Harold stayed busy by teaching simple classes at the community center. He called it basic car care. People of all ages came, young drivers, older folks, single parents. Harold showed them how to check tire pressure, how to read warning lights, how to change a battery safely. One teenager named Ethan Cole stayed after class each week. Ethan had curiosity and no money. He reminded Harold of himself at 19. Ethan said he wanted to become a mechanic, maybe an engineer. But his family struggled. Harold offered him small paid tasks at the shop, cleaning, organizing tools, reading manuals. He also let Ethan sit in Ruby and Sage, just to feel what careful maintenance can preserve. Ethan's eyes widened. He said, "These feel like time capsules." Harold smiled. He said, "That is what respect can do." The car club planned a spring charity show to raise funds for the local library. Harold volunteered. He helped with permits and layout. He brought both cars. The day of the show the sun was bright. Kids pointed at shiny grills. Older couples shared memories. Harold stood beside Ruby and answered questions. He kept his tone warm. No bragging, just stories. June and Caleb came too. They brought coffee and folded chairs. Ethan arrived wearing a borrowed button-up shirt. He helped direct cars into lines. Near noon a commotion started by the entrance. Mason appeared again. Driving a flashy rented sports car, he parked it at an angle. Like a movie scene, he tried to gather attention. He announced he had a new venture. He said collectors should join his network. Harold walked over and asked him to keep it respectful. This event was for charity, not personal promotion. Mason rolled his eyes and said Harold was jealous. Linda Price stepped in and said, "This is a community event, not a stage for empty promises." Other club members nodded, quietly, firmly. Mason saw the wall of calm faces. He realized his usual charm was not working. He muttered something and left, tires crunching gravel. Harold watched him go. He felt no victory, only a sad clarity. Later that afternoon a man named Victor Hale approached Harold's display. Victor was an older collector from out of town. He spoke softly. He asked about Harold's restoration methods. They talked for an hour about paint thickness, original stitching, and honest documentation. Victor said he was downsizing. He said he wanted his favorite car to go to someone who would treat it with care. He described a pearl white luxury coupe, rare but not loud, elegant and well kept. Harold's heart beat faster, but he kept calm. He asked for records. Victor offered everything. Victor invited Harold to visit and inspect it. No rush, no tricks. Harold agreed. He brought June and Ethan along the next weekend. They saw the coupe in a clean heated garage. It was flawless. It felt like a promise kept. Harold negotiated fairly. He did not stretch beyond his means. He paid in a clear method. The title transfer was proper. The receipts were neat. When Harold drove the pearl white coupe home, he felt the dream shift from fantasy to reality. He parked it beside Ruby and Sage. He named it Pearl. Simple and true. He stood there with June and Ethan. 3 generations of hope in one quiet garage. Harold said softly, "This is how you build, slow, clear, together." With 3 cars Harold finally felt the shape of his life align. Not a museum of 10 machines, but a trilogy with meaning. Ruby was the first leap. Sage was the second chance. Pearl was the reward for doing it right. He photographed each car in soft morning light. He printed the photos and placed them in the notebook. He wrote short notes about why he chose each one. He wrote what Evelyn would have liked. He also wrote a warning in the back. "Do not confuse speed with progress." One evening Mason called from an unknown number. His voice sounded tired. He said he needed to talk. He said he had been in a tough spot. He said he wanted to fix things. Harold considered ignoring the call, but something in the tone felt less sharp than before. He agreed to meet Mason at a public cafe. Daylight, busy tables, nothing private. Mason arrived without the bright jacket. He looked older. His eyes were restless. He said he had lost friends. He said people stopped returning his calls. He said deals fell apart. He said he never meant to hurt Harold. He said he just wanted to win. Harold listened. He did not mock him. He did not soften the truth either. He said, "Mason, you used my trust. You used our family name. You did not protect me." Mason looked down. He said, "I know." Harold asked one simple question. "Do you want forgiveness, or do you want access?" Mason hesitated, then he said, "I want forgiveness." Harold nodded. He said, I can forgive, but you will not touch my finances, you will not be part of my car plans. Mason swallowed and agreed. They sat in silence for a moment, then Mason said he was thinking of leaving town. Harold said, maybe a fresh start will help. Start small, keep promises. Mason gave a weak smile. He said, you always talk like a teacher. Harold said, maybe I became one. After that meeting, Mason did not ask for money. He did not pitch any new venture. He sent a short message once a month. Just checking in. Harold remained cautious, but he noticed a change. Not a miracle, just less noise. Meanwhile, Ethan progressed fast. He studied hard, he saved, he earned a scholarship to a technical program. Harold helped him practice interviews, he lent him books, he coached him on respect and patience. June and Caleb bought a small house. They invited Harold for Sunday dinners. Harold brought desserts and stories. He laughed more. One day June said she was expecting a baby. Harold felt a rush of joy and fear. He thought of the years, the losses, the rebuilds, the garage light at sunrise. He decided to prepare his legacy. He wrote clear documents for the cars, maintenance plans, storage rules. He listed trustworthy contacts from the club. He listed what each car meant. He asked June to keep the notebook safe. He asked her to share it with the child when the time was right. June hugged him and said, Dad, your dream is not just cars, it is your way of living. Harold smiled. He said, then maybe I finally collected the right thing. Outside the window, pearls. White paint reflected the sky, calm and steady. Harold felt gratitude for the lesson. The dream did not fail, it simply refused to be rushed. Spring returned again, and with it a softer kind of excitement. June's baby arrived, a little boy named Noah Morris. Harold held Noah in the living room. He hummed an old tune. He promised to be present. He did not promise Noah a garage full of luxury. He promised him time. Months later, Harold pushed a stroller down the driveway and opened the garage doors. Sunlight slid across Ruby, Sage, and Pearl. 3 quiet shapes like friendly animals resting. Harold spoke to Noah in short phrases. He said, this one is Ruby, she taught me to begin. This one is Sage, he taught me to rebuild. This one is Pearl, she taught me to be patient. Noah could not understand the words, but he reached toward the shine and laughed. Harold felt his chest loosen. He realized he did not need the world to applaud. The car club invited Harold to be guest of honor at the charity show. They gave him a small plaque. It said Community Mentor. Harold kept it on the garage shelf beside the notebook. One afternoon, Mason stopped by without warning. He stood at the edge of the driveway, hesitant. Harold did not invite him inside right away, but he did step onto the porch. Mason said he was leaving town for good. He had found steady work in another state. He said he wanted to say goodbye the right way. He looked at the garage and said, you actually did it. Harold answered, I did it without tricks. Mason nodded. He said, I see that now. I used to think shortcuts were smart. He paused, then he said, I am sorry for slowing you down. Harold studied his face. He saw tiredness, but also sincerity. Harold said, you slowed me down, but you also taught me what to avoid. Mason let out a breath. He said, that is the strangest kindness I ever heard. Harold smiled. He said, it is just the truth. Mason asked if he could see the cars one last time. Harold considered, then he agreed. They walked into the garage. Mason kept his hands in his pockets. He did not touch anything. He looked at Pearl and said, that one is beautiful. Harold said, yes, it is. For a moment they stood in quiet, 2 men shaped by different choices. Before leaving, Mason said, take care of yourself, cousin. Harold said, you too, keep your promises. After Mason left, Harold did not feel anger, he felt closure. Days became calmer. Harold spent time with Noah, with June, with Caleb, with Ethan, who now worked at the shop. Harold still cleaned the cars, but he no longer cleaned to chase a dream, he cleaned to enjoy the present. On warm nights he drove Pearl on back roads, the cabin quiet, the ride smooth. He thought about Evelyn, he imagined her smile, he felt her in the steady hum of the engine. He understood something simple. A collection is not counted only by numbers, it is counted by the care you give, the trust you protect, the people you lift. And when Harold finally sat on the porch at sunrise, he did not whisper someday anymore. He whispered thank you, and the day answered with light. In the garage the poster of the red roadster still hung on the wall, but now it felt like a friend, not a dare.